What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be looking at a 484 FEF oil burner made by Bachman. Now, I got this thing at a place called Hobby Recycling in Michigan. It's right outside Grand Rapids, technically Wyoming. But I saw this for $65 in one of the glass cases. And if you guys are in the Grand Rapids area, Hobby Recycling is a great place. They have a ton, and I mean a ton, of used and new HO, N-Gauge, Z even they go down to. Now, they didn't have a place to test this at Hobby Recycling, so I bought it with the understanding that it might not run great. And when I got it back to where we were staying in Michigan, I actually set up an oval track using the President's Choice track that came in the set in this video, and it actually ran pretty good. It was a little sticky on the low end where it would take a little bit of the controller to get it to go, but then it would go. However, when I brought it home and started running it on my layout, the driving wheels did eventually lock up, or what I remember locking up. So that's what we're going to take a look at in this video, is to see if we can get this engine running again, because this would be the biggest steam engine I have on my layout. Now, like I said, this is made by Bachman, and I have seen videos of the FEF reviewed before, specifically by Sam's Trains, where he opens up this mechanism and it's not very high quality with just the square metal slots for the axles. So I know this mechanism is going to be a little bit on the poorer side to start with, but we'll see what we can do to get it running. So let's change things up and head over to the layout right away and see what's actually wrong with this thing, because it's been a while since I've looked at it. Alright guys, I have got the Union Pacific 484 down on the track. Let's see how it runs, how bad it runs, and maybe that'll give us an idea of what we need to do going into that drivetrain. So let's try going forward with him first. Let's see if we can get anything. Saw a little wheel turn. Oh, it is creeping forward. There's a lot of throttle though. I am at about 60% on the, oh, there, he moved. The wheel spun over once. Let's try and go backwards. I was at about 60%. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I remember what's going on now. So you could see as he runs, he kind of hangs up. There's a tight spot in the drive, just like that. That's what's going on. All right, let's send him backwards one more time, and then we'll probably head back and start taking this thing apart then. Yeah, it's just a tight spot somewhere stuck in there. All right, so that gives me a lot better idea of what's going on with this thing. Like I said, it's been a while since I had ran it. It was a while since we were in Michigan, but now that we've got a good idea of what's going on with it, let's head back to the shop workbench and start taking this thing apart. All right, guys, here we are back on the workbench, and I have the 484 in the foam upside down. What I want to do is try and run it upside down with the transformer. This is actually the transformer from the President's Choice set, but I want to run it upside down with the power to the wheels from the transformer, because I want to see how everything is moving, and I want to see up close how everything is moving. So let me give it, we'll probably need about 50% power here. Let's try and get everything moving. You can definitely hear that motor's trying to move. Let me switch our direction here. Yeah, it's definitely trying to move. But it's getting stuck now. Let's see if we can see what it's getting stuck on. One thing I want to rule out right away is valve gear before taking this whole thing apart. It actually does kind of look to be a section pushing up over here. Let's try running it. I want to try running it backwards again, or away from the stuck spot, to see if that valve gear does the same thing in the other direction. Okay, so now we're stuck again. I think it is valve gear related. I think it's this guy right here. It's going to be hard to see on camera, but it's this connecting rod right in here that looks like it's the problem. This connecting rod wants to move this plastic piece. I think it's offset wrong. Look at the other side. So that's all the way down. Something's definitely still not right. And I can really smell that motor as it runs too. But I do think that connecting rod was a big issue of ours. Now that that part is down, seems to run a little better. Something I want to try doing though is taking this base keeper plate off. I tried doing it before I filmed this part of the video and it didn't seem to want to come off, but I'm going to go at it again and see if I can't see any more of that gear train in there.
Later that same evening.
Alright guys, so after disassembly I learned some pretty important things. The first thing being that yes, this valve gear was quartered wrong, so it should be quartered right now so our arm up here does not bind up. The second thing I learned was that the base keeper down here is actually molded into all of this plastic around the wheels, so you can't pull just this keeper off itself, which is really stupid. Because of that, what my plan is to take the lubricating oil over there and run this on the layout, lubricating this worm gear more and more as it runs through to help work some of that new lubricant down into this. Unfortunately, we can't clean out any of the old lubricant, but this feels pretty dry, this worm gear does. So I'm assuming that the rest of the gear train is also pretty dry. Hopefully getting some new lubricant in there will free some things up and make it easier for this whole motor and assembly to turn. The wheels were turning when I was testing it earlier. However, this motor, you could hear and smell that it was working pretty hard to try and get those wheels to turn. Another interesting thing I learned is that we have a smoke unit. And it looks like we fill it up with a little bit of smoke fluid, which I have in there. Although it might be these two wires right up here that are responsible for the smoke unit. I'm not sure. We'll put some in there just to see if we get anything out of it, but I don't have high hopes. The last thing I found out is that this is a split chassis design, and which kind of explains why you can't pull any of this up. But the whole chassis is split to a positive and negative side. Older locomotive, older design. Put in the comments whether you like it or not. Anyway, with that being said, let's head back over to the layout with just the chassis, and we'll take some oil, run it a little bit, and hopefully we can work some of that new oil in there, get things freed up. Alright guys, so I've got the chassis and wheels down on the track. I'm going to take some of this new oil and just oil up this worm gear a little bit. Don't want a ton, but I do want to work it down the gear train, so we will use a little bit of it. So let's try running it forward. And remember, we did have that problem with the quartering earlier. Well, it looks like we are stuck up again. Hopefully it's just a continuity problem here that we're, oh yep, I do have two of the front wheels off. There we go. Should run a little better now. There we go. See that worm gear really spinning in there. And already, I mean, that's a lot better than it was running. Oh yeah, that's running a lot better than it was before. Awesome, awesome. Everything in the valve gear seems to be running just fine now. Our motor is spinning at a pretty consistent speed. Now this is much better than it was before. Biggest reason being, in order to get this locomotive to move prior to taking it apart, oiling it up a little bit, and fixing the quartering issue, I had to put the controller at 60% to get it to move at all. And now getting it to move, I'm only putting it up to maybe 10%. So we're already vastly better than we were before. Still sticking a little bit, so I'm going to put some more oil in there. And like I said before, the unfortunate part about this locomotive is the fact that you can't open up the base plate to get down to the bottom gears of the drivetrain. But man, even with just adding that lubricant and hopefully working that lubricant down the drivetrain with spinning this worm gear and spinning all the gears, is that it is freeing up. And so far it looks like it's for sure freeing up. I'm gonna actually aim down to the gear that the worm gear is driving. Try and get some oil down there. I don't want a ton, but with that being farther down and spinning a little less, Hopefully getting some more oil on that will get oil farther down the gear train. I do see an orange glow coming from up front here. I'm gonna figure out what that is. I wonder if that's any sort of heating element, because it's not bright enough to be a light. So I'd be curious to see what this is, and if our stack here is getting hot. In the interest of curiosity, I'm going to put a couple drops of smoke fluid down in here, just to see if we do heat up at all. Alright guys, well I have been running it back and forth quite a bit. It does seem that things have loosened up, especially from where they were to start. I am still seeing a little wobble in the Locomotive, but I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do about that without getting the base plate off and to mess with those wheels and the axles in there. Like I said, that base plate is all molded around the entire chassis block on the bottom, so it's going to make it very hard without destroying everything to actually get in there and do things like that. So between the quartering and the sticky drivetrain, I'm going to call this a success. I mean, this thing is running much smoother than it was before. It is just an old cheap Bachman, so I didn't have super high hopes for it when buying it in the first place. But the fact that we were able to unstick it and make it run a lot better than it was running before, if you can call what was before running, I'd call that a success. So let's go ahead and put the body back on. I'm going to hook up the tender, and we'll do a little overview of what this engine looks like, all the features on it. For 65 bucks, I mean, I can't really complain. It's a big running steam engine. Alright guys, we are back in the shop and I have the body put back on the 484 Locomotive. Let's take a look at this engine. It's an older model and it's a bit dusty, and I spilled a little oil on it up there. So let's take a look at everything. Let's start with the tender. I have some separately fitted handrails up here and some nice ladder detailing on the back. A knuckle coupler, which is nice, so we can already put it with any of my rolling stock. The trucks on this tender are 3-axle. However, they are all plastic wheels, and this tender itself is very, very light. There's not really any weight to it. I might take this apart at some point and add some weights inside of here. I have some flat weights just to give this a little bit more stability on the tracks so it doesn't tip over or derail. The front basically has all molded detail, and the paint job, the Union Pacific paint job, does look very good on this tender. And that's about it. Pretty simple detailed tender. A pin connection to the Locomotive with just a plastic drawbar, and no pickups in the tender, like I said, everything being plastic. So let's take a look at the Locomotive now. Like we were looking at before, very nice valve gear, nice metal looking valve gear, and it moves in a very satisfying way. Separately fitted handrails up top, a little separately fitted, looks like a horn, which is very interesting. Little headlight here, so maybe that glow inside is a headlight. I'm not quite sure. Some nice separately fitted metal parts up in the front. A fake plastic knuckle coupler up front. Just like the last steam locomotive I looked at, there is a seam line running down the boiler. Really noticeable up here. So it's not the most attractive thing, but it's an old $65 model. So taking a look at the cab detail, there is some detailing, which is better than the last steam engine we looked at. It's nice to have any cab detailing at all with this thing, especially being 65 bucks. I mean, it's really hard to complain about a lot of stuff now that we've got this running. Looking back at the underside, I actually think we are missing a cover here for this back truck. It looks like this is split chassis as well, and it had wires at one point connecting it that are actually cut off from the base truck. It doesn't seem to be hindering our power ability on the layout, so I'm just going to leave it as is for now. Firebox detail is actually kind of cool. A little more molded in than on the new ones, I think. So that looks pretty cool. A couple more separately fitted things up top. But other than that, that's basically it. Pretty simple Locomotive and tender. And now that we've looked at everything, let's head back to the layout and see this thing run. Well guys, that just about does it. The train's running pretty well. Haven't had a lot of problems with it after refitting the body. And it looks great running around the layout. For 65 bucks and a little bit of work, I'm more than happy to have a nice big 484 steam engine on the layout. Looks super good running around and right at home hauling the freight cars behind it. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I have some more engines that still need fixing, so more videos coming soon. Take care guys, and see you next time.